have in my hand here a cantilever wall bracket. It's for mounting large flat screen televisions onto the wall, and it's the highest end wall mounting bracket that we currently stock on TV Trade. It's very comprehensive both in the range of televisions it can handle and also in terms of the flexibility it gives with them. So the main purpose here is just give an overview of the bracket, how it works, how to mount it, and the advantages of it, I suppose. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to quickly open this box here. You can see it comes in a pretty neat box. Okay. So it comes pretty well pre-assembled. There's a user manual here which is okay. The next thing here is you can see there's two brackets here which will actually be bolted onto the back of the television. Okay. And the next part of it here then is there is the main bracket which is bolted onto the wall, which the brackets here that are on the back of the television will simply clamp onto. Okay. We have a set of tools here which we'll cover in a while, along with two locks. And a little small spirit level, and we have another bag of componentry here, okay, bolts and plugs, which we're going to cover in a moment, okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm simply going to put this back in its box, and I'm going to show you ones that we have in a more disassembled manner, and I'll just go through the assembly process on it, okay. So we'll just move this out of the way. So the next thing that I suppose to cover is what tools, in addition to the ones that have been provided with this kit, will we need? Well, the main thing, first of all, is a drill and a 10mm drill bit. So we can actually drill the holes in the wall. Now in this particular demonstration we're going to do it on a solid concrete wall, okay? So this is obviously the surest way of mounting it. Now you can of course mount onto partition walls and things like that, but you need to do other steps then which we're not going to cover today, which is finding the timbers, have a timber finder, things like that, and use special locking bolts and all the rest of it. So it's important when you're doing that you cover it, especially from a safety perspective. So what I'm going to do now is just quickly cover what's in this kit here. So what we have here is we have a series of bolts here, and these bolts are going to be used for bolting the brackets here onto the back of the television. So they come, we'll say, in each one that comes in a certain dimension also comes in different lengths, okay? And the idea of this is that we may want to bolt it directly on, or there's spacers here which you might want to use, let's say, in terms of angling televisions. But in general, we'll say, for this type of television, because the bracketry on it is so flexible, you wouldn't be using these spacers, okay? The next thing here is when using the bolts, you have an option of using these special washers which are sized to match each of the different bolts here, okay? And then we have plugs and bolts as well. So we have the idea of this here is that there's the plugs and bolts for actually mounting it onto the concrete wall, and there's washers here to go along with this if you want to make sure that the head is well gripped onto the bracket. So what I do next is there's some locking bars here which is simply to lock the TV into position on the bracket so it can't be pushed off afterwards, and I'll demonstrate that. We have 3 Allen keys here, different sizes, and we also have Velcro here for actually tightening or for strapping cables together, things like that, give a neat finish. We have these brackets here which will be bolted onto the back of the television. We have a set of 2 locks here which are for locking these locking brackets into position, and these bolts here are the ones we're actually going to be using now when I demonstrate about how we're going to put the bracket onto the back of this television. We have a rather medium size flat screen TV here. So what we're going to do here is, the first thing to note here is there's 4 holes here which are threaded, okay? Now all televisions that are on the market here in Ireland will meet the VISA standard. So it basically means that there's an agreed standard in terms of distance holes will be apart, okay? So on smaller televisions you'd normally have, we'll say, the VISA standard either 75 or 100, which means the holes will be 75 or 100 millimeters apart, centre to centre. On this particular one here, it's 200 millimeters apart. So the first thing I'm going to do now is I'll simply come along and I'm going to pick up one of these brackets here. So just to show you the flexibility on these brackets here, we can actually move it up and down like this. Okay, and this is to do with the angle of tilt, which I'll demonstrate at a later point. But if we look here, there's an up arrow here and the word up written, and it simply means that this goes on the top of the television. So what we need to do is when we come along and we mount this, we need to make sure that the holes will mount here, both top and bottom. So on the top here, it's just a defined hole, and on the bottom, it's a slot. So it just allows for a certain amount of misalignment here. So what I'm going to do at this particular point is, I'm just going to pick up, going to angle this down to make it slightly easier here. I'm going to pick up this screw here and this bolt, and I'm going to get this my Phillips screwdriver here, So I'm using a Phillips screwdriver as well, and a ratchet with a 13mm socket, which I'll be using at a later point for the bolting onto the bracket onto the wall. So we come along here, and then the next one here, slot it in here, and this hole here is slightly more awkward of the two. So do it there. So we'll come to do the next one here. We're going to do the same as on the first one here. We obviously want them level. So it's on the 4th hole down. So I line it up on the 4th hole. I come along, get another bolt, put it on. That's just it. Bolt it to there. And then I have here. So now we have these brackets on the back of the TV. So what we'll actually be able to do now is that these hooks here, which you can see here and here, here and here, what will actually happen is we'll just drop the television onto the bracket and it'll catch on the ring, okay? So I'm going to demonstrate that in a moment, but I'm just going to move on now to a bracket we've already actually mounted onto the wall. And this is the cantilever bracket itself. So what you can see is in its purest form, it's simply pushed against the wall like this. But when we pull it out, it's like this. So when we take this bracket out of the box, it's actually fully pre-assembled like this. The only thing we need to do is we just need to hold it up to the wall, drill the 4 holes to have it totally square and obviously horizontal, and then we have the bracket on the wall, and at that point we can actually come along, pick up our TV and drop it onto it. Now I'm just going to cover the one point about how to make sure that this is square on the wall. So what we can do is we come along, we put a spirit level on here, which is just mark on. So we can check the squareness here, but more important again is than the squareness just there, is we will need to check the squareness out here to make sure that we have a bracket that's quite level, because this is obviously the key thing. Now the front and the back part obviously should be totally square, but it wouldn't necessarily be so. Sometimes it can be a slight variance. So if you're not sure, go for the point at the front where you want to make it as square as possible, okay? So you can see any of the great level of flexibility on it. So what we're going to do here is we're going to pull the bracket out like this, and I'm actually just going to pick up the TV, this, and we'll just move it into position here now. So we'll see it's caught on the 4 hooks here. So it's caught here, and on the bottom as well, here, and on the bottom here as well, okay? Now if we just go to slide this off along here, we can see it actually stops here. And the reason it stops here, there's obviously a stopper here, it can't go at a certain point. But the weakness in the safety of this, as it's currently assembled, is that if we were actually to push the TV from the bottom, we can actually take it directly off in the same manner that I've just dropped it on. Now to overcome this problem, and I'm going to get you to come around when I'm doing this here, what we need to do actually is we need to use the following things, which is a locking bracket, such as we have here, and this lock here, okay? So there's 2 stages to this. So the first thing here is I'm just going to slide this bracket in here, and I'm just going to lean back here, and I'm just going to get this lock here now. So what we hear is there's a hole here, so we just slide it through this hole into this, and we lock it here, okay? So now we'll get our second bracket and our second lock. And what we do with this bracket here is we're just going to slide it from the far side and we lock it in here. Now with most TV brackets and things like this that I've seen this on, there's actually a long single bar which just locks in, and I think that's a better design slightly than this, but this still works okay. The key thing here is that we just slide it down like this and we just lock it into position. And now if I go to the front of this TV and try to lift it up, it can't, because it's actually been locked into position here. So because this is stopping it here from actually lifting off, okay? So from that perspective anyway. So in terms of the flexibility you can get here, well if we look at the angle here, on the back here, and this angle here, we can see that we can tilt it all the way down like this, So if we're looking from the front, there's a great thing. So you can imagine if you had it in the pub or something like this, and you had it in the top corner, it'd be great. You can angle it down if you had it mounted in a very high position, or we can angle it here and actually slightly upwards as well. And then in terms of what type of rotation can we achieve on it, well, we can achieve it from here all the way over to here. So on this television here, which I think is 32 inch, we have the full flexibility, 180 degree flexibility on it, okay? So, I mean, I find it a particularly great bracket because it gives the great flexibility. It's very easy to assemble and mount, and you know, it's so versatile in terms of the range of different size televisions it covers. So that's it anyway, a fairly comprehensive overview of the cantilever wall bracket, which will handle televisions from the size of 23 inches all the way up to 42 inches.